The first thing I noticed was the smell. Not the usual mix of cedar and soldering fumes I'd come to expect from my backyard shed/lab, but something acrid like burned plastic and smug entitlement. Then, the lights blinked. Just once, like a nervous twitch, but it was enough to make my entire security system stutter, my server hum like it was panicking, and worst of all, it made my AI-powered espresso machine glitch out mid-pour, spraying hot coffee directly onto my cat. As Biscuit yowled and flew off the counter, claws out like a caffeinated ninja, I looked up at the blinking router light and thought, something's not right. I live at the edge of our suburban labyrinth, a cul-de-sac where the HOA rules are more sacred than the Constitution, and Karen, the president, believes she was divinely appointed to patrol property lines like a medieval warlord. I'd picked this house years ago because it was the last one on the block with a yard big enough to justify a separate workspace. The shed was my sanctuary. Solar-powered, insulated, password-protected, and filled with thousands of dollars of sensitive tech equipment. It was my brain's playground and my career's command center. So when the network started acting drunk, I knew something, or someone, had breached my peace. At first, I thought it was just a misconfigured switch. I ran diagnostics, rebooted the router, recalibrated my smart systems, but the glitches kept happening, delays in uploads, devices disconnecting, the lights dimming for no reason, the espresso machine developing a rebellious streak. Then came the discovery that blew the whole thing open. An unfamiliar MAC address bouncing across my private subnet, tagged to something labeled HOA main. HOA main. Now, I'm a cybersecurity consultant. My job is to notice the things people aren't supposed to see. I ran a deeper trace and found the device, actually several devices, streaming massive amounts of data through my line. HOA security cameras, smart thermostats, clubhouse admin terminals, and the cherry on top, Karen's personal laptop, mid-Zoom call, discussing next steps for disciplinary action against overly private residents. Oh no, no, no. The next morning, I walked the perimeter of my yard and circled the shed. That's when I saw it, a small, rough hole drilled at the base of the back wall, half hidden behind a bag of mulch I hadn't moved in weeks. A thick Cat6 Ethernet cable snaked from the hole and into the bushes, disappearing through the fence toward the shared utility strip where the HOA's electrical boxes live. I followed it. The cable was zip-tied along the back fence, camouflaged like some guerrilla installation, and terminated inside a locked HOA box labeled Authorized Access Only. The cable was humming. So let me paint the picture here. The HOA had not only drilled into my shed, on my property, but had rerouted their entire Wi-Fi infrastructure through my private network. They were stealing my bandwidth. And worse, they had violated my lab, a sacred space more secure than my own house. I didn't go ballistic. Not yet. I needed to see how deep this went. I returned to my lab, shut down the main interface, and activated the sniffer. Within minutes, I was capturing traffic. HOA board member emails, security footage from their clubhouse, shopping data, digital calendars, encrypted payment logs, even Karen's endless Pinterest boards of Power Woman CEO moods. They'd routed it all through my bandwidth, free ride, zero permission, complete invasion. I took screenshots. I cataloged packet transfers. I flagged every byte of unauthorized use. And then, with the calm of a man holding a nuclear launch code, I walked over to the HOA office and rang the buzzer. Karen opened the door like she was expecting a bouquet, not a data folder. Her smile was that tight-lipped politician kind, the type you could crack with a feather. Before she could speak, I handed her a folder with 6 printed pages. "What's this?" she asked. "An itemized record of every device the HOA has been running through my personal internet line," I said, watching her face pale. She tried to recover. "Oh, that's just temporary. The tech team said they needed a strong signal for the clubhouse cameras. We assumed the shed was public utility access. It's right on the border, after all." My voice dropped an octave. "You assumed wrong. That shed has stood on my property line since before the HOA was formed. It's listed on the deed. And you drilled into it. That's illegal entry, property damage, and unauthorized network use." Karen blinked. "It was for the good of the community." "No," I said. "It was for the good of your streaming service and your 12 Alexa devices." She folded her arms. "Well, we can compensate you for a month of use. $50 fair." I nearly laughed. "I've already drawn up an invoice." And I had. That night, I returned home and began preparing for the ultimate surgical strike. I called it Operation Cable Drop. It wasn't just revenge, it was retribution, precision engineered. First, I installed a firewall trap that rerouted all HOA traffic to a mirrored sandbox. I let it run for 48 hours, collecting every juicy byte. Then, I disconnected the switch, rewired my shed's panel, and installed a sign on the back wall that read, "No unauthorized access. You are being watched." Just to twist the knife, I took the entire length of Ethernet cable, coiled it into a giant pretzel, and dropped it right in front of the HOA office with a printed invoice folded neatly on top. Total: $7,420. Unauthorized bandwidth use: $3,000. Digital intrusion detection analysis: $2,500. Equipment disruption and downtime: $1,200. AI espresso malfunction, emotional damages: $500. Cat cleaning: $220. The next morning, HOA drama exploded like a reality show finale. Karen stormed up to my porch with 2 board members and what I think was a paralegal cousin. She started yelling about community threats and withholding essential services. I simply played the footage from my security camera, their contractor drilling into my wall, laughing about borrowing the nerd's juice. They left quieter than they arrived. But I wasn't done. Because if there's one thing I know, it's that people who steal bandwidth are never smart enough to hide their track. And Karen? She was about to learn that in my world, data always has a price. Operation Cable Drop didn't just begin with cutting a wire. It started with me donning a hoodie, sipping lukewarm espresso, and staring at a screen like I was about to launch a satellite into space. Because I wasn't just removing a cable, I was going to make the HOA feel it. Every board member, every entitled click, every sneaky byte of stolen bandwidth would pay its price. But it had to be perfect. It had to be methodical. Because the goal wasn't just disconnection. The goal was digital humiliation, layered with legal consequences and wrapped in poetic justice. The first phase of my plan was simple reconnaissance. I connected a passive network sniffer to the suspicious port and let it quietly record every packet coming in and out. I figured I'd see some mild overuse, maybe a few camera streams, smart thermostats. But what I uncovered was next-level absurdity. The HOA wasn't just siphoning Wi-Fi for their own clubhouse. They had created an entire subnet on my infrastructure. 6 smart TVs, multiple security cameras, 3 Nest thermostats, a printer that somehow had a Facebook login, and Karen's personal laptop streaming what appeared to be an entire season of courtroom reality TV. The HOA had even sold temporary guest Wi-Fi, access to an Airbnb down the block. I had unknowingly become the provider of a rogue ISP, powered by my private line, inside my private shed. Naturally, I started documenting everything. I recorded timestamps, IP logs, usage graphs, even screen captures showing their devices connected to my router. I ran pings from their terminals to my server and back, logging the exact route. I created a detailed usage report and added a little personal flair to the invoice with creative itemizations like Netflix overages, Karen's viewing history, and streaming Judge Judy on stolen internet Class A violation. I knew they'd throw a tantrum, but tantrums are easy to deflect when you've got the receipt. Now it was time to yank the cord. Late that night, I headed out to the shed with a headlamp, gloves, and the dramatic mood lighting of a spy movie. I powered everything down, clipped the Ethernet line at the source, then pulled it out like a magician pulling a snake from a hat. The thing was longer than expected, about 60 feet of high-quality Cat 6, which I coiled with satisfying precision. I attached a bright orange tag labeled Property Violation Evidence, Not Yours, and left it on their utility box like a Christmas wreath from the cyber god. Then I printed out the invoice and hand-delivered it to their mailbox. I debated emailing it too, but no, this had to be experienced physically. The next morning, I sipped coffee while watching the fireworks. Karen showed up at my door before noon, flanked by 2 equally stressed board members, one of whom looked like he hadn't slept since dial-up. Karen was dressed like she was headed to a courtroom, which was ironic given what she'd done. She didn't even knock, just banged on the door like I owed her money and had ghosted her after brunch. I opened the door slowly, smiled, and leaned on the frame like I had all day. "You had no right to remove that line," Karen hissed, waving my invoice like it was a tabloid scandal. I stayed calm. "It ran through my property. Illegally. Without consent. That cable supported our clubhouse systems," she snapped. "You've shut down security. You've endangered the entire community." "That's funny," I said, pulling out a small remote and showing her footage on my phone. "Because here's video of your contractor trespassing, drilling into my shed, and laughing about how I'd never even notice. That's breaking and entering. That's felony theft of service." The board member behind her shifted uncomfortably. The other one just blinked at the screen like it was showing a horror movie. Karen's voice trembled but tried to remain firm. "We're willing to resolve this amicably. $50 sound fair?" I nearly choked. "Karen, your systems used over 1.2 terabytes of data across 2 weeks, impacted the integrity of my lab equipment, caused data loss during a secure upload, and fried my espresso machine. $50 wouldn't even cover my coffee filter replacement." "This is extortion," she snapped, jabbing her finger at the invoice. I smiled wider. "Actually, it's itemized restitution. But we can take it to small claims court if you prefer. I'd love to present the footage." She stormed off with a huff that sounded like a deflating yoga ball. The board members didn't even follow her at first. One of them stayed behind and asked, in a surprisingly respectful tone, if they could just plug into a public node somewhere else. I told him that's what they should have done in the first place. But Karen didn't quit. The next night, I caught a motion alert at 1:12 a.m. The same utility strip. I watched live as a man in a reflective vest, definitely not from the cable company, crept into the alley with a spool of fresh cable. He ducked behind the fence and started digging, attempting to bury the line this time. Clever move. Except I'd buried motion sensors in that area the day I installed my shed. He tripped too within minutes, which triggered my night vision cameras and also activated a speaker in my shed that blasted a looping audio clip of Karen's HOA meeting voice declaring, "This is not an authorized use of community funds." The man bolted. Left the cable behind, half-dug. I reported the intrusion to the local code enforcement office and sent them the footage, including a time-stamped video of the van's license plate. Meanwhile, I had a little fun. I took the cable, spray-painted it neon pink, and mailed it back to the HOA with a sticky note. "You dropped this." But I didn't stop there. I launched the next part of my plan: passive network interference. See, before fully disconnecting their system, I had cloned the HOA's internal network schema and simulated a replica of their Wi-Fi environment. Then I launched a spoof network nearby, titled HOA Guest Secure, with a login portal that captured credentials. Within hours, several devices, presumably unaware of the sabotage, connected to it. Harmless enough, until the redirect page sent them to a message that said, "This network is operated by the same man whose shed you violated. Please enjoy your stolen cookies." They couldn't prove it was me, of course, but I could see Karen unraveling from afar. My inbox began to fill with vague legal threats, passive-aggressive newsletters, and even a HOA-wide memo warning residents not to interact with hostile digital elements in the neighborhood. Hostile digital elements? I had become a one-man cyber boogeyman. I knew the next play was coming. Karen wasn't the type to lick her wounds quietly. She was going to escalate. She was going to involve lawyers. And I was going to be ready. Because unlike the cable they ran through my shed, I actually knew how to cover my track. The cease and desist letter arrived 2 days later, tucked neatly in an envelope with the HOA's logo on the corner and just enough smugness in the return address to make me laugh. It wasn't even delivered by mail. It was hand-delivered by the same board member who had looked like he wanted to dissolve into dust during Karen's previous meltdown. He muttered something about just doing my duty and scurried off the porch like he was delivering a live grenade. I opened it with one hand while stirring a pot of chili with the other and read the first line aloud. You are hereby ordered to refrain from interfering with community telecommunications systems. I snorted so hard I nearly spilled the chili. The letter was written in legalese that sounded impressive until you actually understood law. They accused me of tampering with community systems, disrupting emergency communications, and engaging in what they called technological sabotage with malicious intent. I set the letter down and chuckled. They were trying to spin this like I had taken down their water supply or disabled hospital equipment. All I did was remove an illegal wire from my own shed and give them a taste of what it feels like when someone else controls your internet. But if they wanted to go the legal route, I was more than happy to meet them there, because I didn't just have evidence. I had evidence with timestamps, metadata, and video of Karen approving the whole debacle. I responded with a 36-page rebuttal that included high-resolution images of the drilled hole, surveillance footage of the original cable install, a detailed packet inspection log showing data flow from my network to theirs, and FCC regulations outlining exactly how what they did constituted illegal signal interception and telecom trespass. I even included a screenshot of a text exchange between two board members complaining about the nerd next door and hoping he wouldn't notice the cable because his shed always looks like it's trying to launch a spaceship. As compliments go, I'd take that one. They didn't respond. Not immediately. But I knew Karen was stewing. Her ego was a delicate ecosystem, and I had just introduced Fire Ant. She was used to scaring residents into submission with empty threats and capitalized memos. But I had turned her playground into a digital minefield, and she couldn't predict my next move. Which is why she made her biggest mistake yet. She tried to replace the cable again, only this time underground and with what looked like professional help. I caught them the moment they arrived. A white van with a logo that was suspiciously generic, National Network Services, parked near the utility strip in broad daylight. Two guys in orange vests got out and began unloading spools of cable, clearly thinking they were being sneaky. What they didn't know was that I'd installed a smart soil sensor behind the fence line, not just for moisture readings but to detect disturbances. As soon as they started digging, I got an alert on my phone. Movement detected, back fence quadrant 3. I flipped on the camera feed and zoomed in. Sure enough, one of them was shoveling while the other ran conduit through a trench like they were building a secret military base. I grabbed my phone, hit record, and casually walked out with a glass of lemonade in hand. I leaned on the fence, watched for a moment, and then asked, "Do you have a permit for that?" They both froze. The shoveler looked up, squinting. "HOA sent us," he said, clearly hoping that explained everything. I nodded slowly and sipped my drink. "You're on private property. And that conduit is 2 feet into my line." They exchanged glances. The one holding the cable started packing up. The other looked like he wanted to argue but thought better of it when I lifted the phone and pointed it at his face. "Smile for the code enforcement report," I said. They left without another word, leaving the trench half dug and the cable abandoned like a botched art heist. At this point, it wasn't just about internet anymore. It was a full-scale power struggle. Karen couldn't stand the fact that someone had outmaneuvered her, and she definitely couldn't stand being mocked in a very public, very digital way. I knew the next step would be her trying to control the narrative, and I was absolutely right. That weekend, a notice was slipped under every door in the neighborhood. It was from the HOA, warning residents of ongoing cyberattacks from an unnamed individual who has taken issue with the HOA's infrastructure. It claimed someone had been hacking into the community network and sabotaging emergency response systems. It was a ridiculous piece of propaganda, but effective in its vagueness. People didn't know the full story, so they assumed it was serious. One neighbor even asked me if I had heard about the internet terrorist nearby. I almost choked on my sandwich, so I decided to go public. I compiled everything, every video, every scan, every screenshot of Karen's increasingly unhinged emails, and posted it all to Reddit under r/EntitledPeople and r/ProRevenge. I told the story start to finish, from the espresso machine betrayal to the coiled cable with the invoice. The post exploded. Within hours, it had thousands of upvotes, hundreds of comments, and a small crowd of internet heroes offering advice, memes, and legal resources. Someone even found my neighborhood on Google Maps and marked the HOA office with the tag, Bandwidth Bandits HQ. The story was getting traction. Fast. 2 days later, I was contacted by a local news reporter who wanted to do a segment on neighborhood tech justice. I declined an on-camera interview but gave her the documents, the photos, and the footage. The story aired that night. Karen's face wasn't shown, but her voice was. Clear as day. Just drill through the shed, he'll never notice. That clip made it to the evening news montage, right between a raccoon stealing a taco truck and a llama loose on the highway. Glorious. After that, things spiraled for the HOA. Several residents started asking for a special meeting to review board practices. A petition began circulating to audit the HOA's tech budget. Someone discovered that they'd been paying a premium service fee for network redundancy that didn't even exist. And one very observant neighbor pointed out that the clubhouse thermostat had been set to 80 degrees for months because the internet kept cutting out. People were connecting the dots, and they didn't like what they saw. Karen's next move was desperate. She tried to accuse me of weaponizing technology against the community and demanded I be banned from future HOA meetings. But this backfired spectacularly when a tech-savvy teenager from down the street stood up at a meeting and asked, "Is that before or after you drilled into his property and watched Judge Judy on his Wi-Fi?" Karen tried to respond but ended up turning purple and calling the kid a disrespectful little surveillance monkey. It did not go over well. The HOA board, under pressure, reluctantly announced a formal review of the events. Meanwhile, I sent a copy of everything to the FCC and the local telecom oversight body. A week later, a field inspector showed up to examine the utility box. Turns out the HOA's entire setup was in violation of multiple ordinances. Worse, the inspector discovered that the HOA had used funds to install network equipment in short-term rentals outside the neighborhood. Karen had been reselling access, pocketing a management fee. That's when it stopped being petty and started getting very real. Karen had been digging herself a hole since the first drill touched my shed. And now, with the authorities involved and her neighbors furious, that hole was starting to look like a grave for her career. But I wasn't going to throw the last shovel of dirt. Not yet. That honor would go to something far simpler. An invoice, a pink cable, and a Reddit post that just kept going viral. The invoice was never meant to be the end, it was meant to be the fuse. And judging by the way it spread through the neighborhood, the HOA boardroom, and eventually the internet itself, it might as well have been wrapped in fireworks. I posted the full story to Reddit with every piece of evidence carefully laid out. Not just for catharsis, but to prevent Karen and her HOA cronies from rewriting the narrative. This time, the truth would be carved into the digital stone forever. The post hit r/EntitledPeople first, then jumped to r/ProRevenge, and from there, it exploded. Thousands of upvotes, floods of comments, people begging for updates, lawyers laughing at the itemized espresso machine charge. Someone even recreated the shed in Minecraft and staged a cable heist reenactment complete with Karen NPCs. It was as ridiculous as it was satisfying. I hadn't planned for it to go viral, but once it did, the story took on a life of its own. Within 48 hours, a local news affiliate reached out for comment. The anchor wanted to run a feel-good piece titled, "Neighborhood Cyber Showdown Leaves HOA Red-Faced." I told them they could use whatever material I had already made public. I wasn't trying to become famous. I just wanted to make it very clear that people like Karen couldn't drill into someone else's life and expect no consequences. The news story ran during the evening slot, and while I didn't appear on camera, the anchor played the voice clip of Karen approving the cable install. There was something deliciously poetic about watching her words broadcasted in high definition across the same airwaves she had tried to dominate. The fallout was immediate. By the next morning, the entire neighborhood was buzzing. Residents started whispering to each other over fences, at mailboxes, in checkout lines. "Did you see the clip? I didn't know we were paying for 2 internet plans." Wait, she watched what on his network? It was chaos for the HOA. The people who had blindly voted for Karen's proposals were now scrambling to understand where their dues had gone. An anonymous email began circulating, containing screenshots of budget discrepancies, including a $1,500 charge listed as network integrity restoration from 3 months back. No one had questioned it before. Now, every line was under a microscope. It didn't take long before residents demanded a town hall. A real one, not one of Karen's staged, 15-minute slideshow fests where no one could ask questions unless pre-approved in writing. This meeting would be public, live-streamed, and entirely unfiltered. Karen fought it tooth and nail, claimed it was counterproductive to community unity, and a distraction from real issues. But no one was buying that anymore. The board reluctantly agreed, and the date was set for the following Saturday. Meanwhile, I kept receiving anonymous tips. One came from a former board member who'd stepped down a year earlier. He told me Karen had been pushing sketchy tech contracts for a while now, always with vague language, always paid to companies that didn't seem to exist outside of Gmail addresses and P.O. boxes. Another tip came from someone claiming to be related to a contractor Karen had hired. They said she had told the guy to keep it quiet, and that the nerd in the shed will never notice. He's probably playing with robots. I saved every tip, every screenshot, and prepared a digital packet just in case this went beyond local drama and into actual legal territory. When the town hall finally arrived, the energy in the room was electric. You could feel the tension the moment people walked in. Chairs scraped, voices hushed, cameras clicked on. Karen stood at the front like she was still in control, wearing a blazer that looked 2 sizes too powerful for her, and a smile stretched tight enough to snap. She opened with a monologue about community spirit, about ungrateful residents, about slander from tech-savvy individuals with too much time and not enough empathy. That was her mistake, because her speech wasn't just tone-deaf, it was gasoline on a fire. People erupted. One woman stood up and asked why her dues had gone up while clubhouse services had gone down. A man pointed out that the thermostat had been broken for weeks and was still drawing power. Someone else demanded an explanation for the ghost Wi-Fi access points that were showing up on their devices. Karen tried to pivot, tried to blame the unauthorized interference from me. But then someone in the crowd played the news clip on their phone. The part where Karen clearly said, "Just drill through the shed, he'll never notice." The room went silent. Then it roared. It was over. Not officially, not yet, but the power had shifted. The residents called for a vote of no confidence on the spot. Karen tried to shut it down, claiming it wasn't procedurally valid, but another board member, clearly done with her antics, said, "If we're so big on procedure, maybe we shouldn't have used stolen internet." The crowd applauded. Within minutes, a petition was passed around. People signed it in droves. Karen left the meeting red-faced, shouting something about defamation and lawsuits and ungrateful tech trolls. But the real twist came the next morning. I woke up to find an envelope on my porch. No return address. Inside was a flash drive and a typed note that read, "Thought you might want to see this before it disappears." I plugged it into a clean, air-gapped laptop and opened the files. What I found made my jaw drop. It was a full digital log of HOA financials from the past year, real records with notes, receipts, email chains. And buried within it was a trove of damning evidence. Karen had not only approved the illegal cable installation, but she'd also rerouted HOA funds into a technical reserve that she used for private purchases. Gift cards, subscription services, even a monthly stipend listed as connectivity compensation. She had essentially been charging the HOA for internet, while stealing it from me. This changed everything. I contacted a lawyer. Not because I wanted to sue her, at least not yet, but because I wanted to make sure the evidence was handled properly. The lawyer took one look and said, "She's done. And probably doesn't know it yet." We drafted a final letter to the board summarizing everything: her actions, the receipts, the cable, the theft, the sabotage, the fraud. The letter ended with a note: "This is no longer a neighborhood issue. This is a legal one." The board acted swiftly. They voted to suspend Karen from all HOA duties pending a full audit. They agreed to pay the invoice I'd submitted weeks ago, plus an extra $2,000 for what they called emotional distress and digital abuse. I didn't ask questions. I just cashed the check. Karen was banned from the clubhouse. Her access to HOA systems was revoked. And the cable? It's still in my shed. I mounted it on the wall like a trophy, right next to a plaque that says, "Unauthorized bandwidth usage, paid in full." And though the storm had mostly passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that one more twist was coming. Because people like Karen don't disappear quietly. They try one last move. One final tantrum. I just didn't expect it to come in the form of a subpoena. The subpoena arrived folded neatly inside a manila envelope, hand-delivered this time by an actual process server who looked almost apologetic. I was in the middle of assembling a new solar battery bank in the shed when he knocked. He didn't say much, just handed over the envelope and said, "Good luck," like I was about to step into a prize fight instead of a courtroom. Inside, in bold letters, it read, "Notice of Civil Litigation. Plaintiff, Karen R. Delaney, acting as private citizen." I had to read it twice just to believe it. Karen was suing me personally, for defamation, emotional distress, and what she called malicious technological interference resulting in public humiliation. It would have been laughable if it hadn't been so meticulously ridiculous. The woman had the audacity to use phrases like digital assault and personal targeting via coded manipulation. She even accused me of cyber-stalking her Pinterest boards. That part nearly made me spit coffee across the shed. At first, I considered ignoring it. But ignoring someone like Karen only makes them dig deeper. People like her don't back down when they're embarrassed. They double down, triple down, and drag everyone else into the flames if they think it'll distract from their own smoke. So I handed the envelope to my lawyer, a soft-spoken man named Clark who carried the quiet confidence of someone who enjoyed paperwork the way other people enjoyed spa days. Clark reviewed the contents for 10 minutes, then closed the folder with a sigh and said, "This might actually be fun." We prepared. I gathered every record, every packet log, every email, clip, screenshot, and Reddit comment. I even included receipts from the HOA's reimbursement and the audit documentation that confirmed Karen had, indeed, diverted community funds for personal tech use. The entire narrative was airtight. My defense wasn't just solid, it was bulletproof. But Karen's strategy wasn't really about winning. It was about dragging me through the mud and hoping I'd get tired, give up, or settle. What she didn't count on was that I enjoy the mud. Especially when I bring a digital flamethrower to the pit. Court day came faster than expected. Small claims court, plain walls, flickering fluorescent lights, the kind of place that sees more neighborly fence disputes and traffic violations than full-blown Wi-Fi espionage cases. Karen arrived dressed like she was accepting an Oscar for Most Victimized Civilian, complete with pearl earrings and a binder she could barely hold upright. She sat down at the plaintiff's table, smiled at me like we were old co-workers she'd just fired, and began organizing her theatrical mess of paper. I nodded politely, then opened my laptop and waited. The judge walked in, looked about as thrilled to be there as a man standing in line at the DMV, and asked Karen to begin. Her opening statement was a masterpiece of melodrama. She called herself a pillar of the community, claimed I had weaponized technology in a domestic environment, and said I'd manipulated neighborhood perception to portray her as a villainous overlord. At one point she even claimed the Reddit post had resulted in mental anguish so severe that she was forced to cancel her book club indefinitely. The judge scribbled something on a legal pad, probably needs therapy or dear God. When it was my turn, I didn't need to say much. I let the evidence speak for itself. I presented timestamps showing the HOA's illegal cable run. I played the video of the contractor drilling into my shed. I showed the audit that proved Karen had personally benefited from the scheme. I even dropped in the news clip where her voice, clear as day, approved the installation. My lawyer followed with the clincher. The FCC complaint that documented the entire saga from start to finish, ending with a statement from the telecom authority that said, in no uncertain terms, that I had acted within my legal rights. Karen's face went from smug to ghost white in under 10 seconds. The judge paused, looked over the evidence again, and asked one question. Did you authorize a cable to be installed through this man's shed? Karen sputtered. It was community necessity. It was misunderstood. He made it sound worse than it was. The judge nodded once, then ruled in my favor. Not only was the case dismissed, but the judge also warned Karen that continued legal harassment could result in sanctions. She was advised to reconsider future civil actions that appear retaliatory in nature. That was the legal equivalent of being told to sit down and be quiet before she embarrassed herself further. But the fallout didn't stop at the courthouse steps. Word spread fast. The community, already fed up with her antics, now had the final nail in the coffin. Karen was officially removed from the HOA board at an emergency meeting that very night. She didn't even show up. Instead, she reportedly tried to issue a neighborhood-wide statement through an email blast that bounced back because, unbeknownst to her, she had already been locked out of the HOA's admin portal. Irony's favorite flavor served cold. A new board was elected within 2 weeks, composed entirely of residents who had either been burned by Karen or had watched the circus from the sidelines and decided enough was enough. They invited me to a board meeting, not to reprimand me, but to ask for help. Help securing the HOA's systems, building a real infrastructure, and creating protections against future misuse. I agreed on one condition. I wanted no official title, no badge, just freedom to build things that worked and a small corner of the budget labeled tech discretionary. They agreed unanimously. I redesigned the Clubhouse network, added end-to-end encryption, set up a firewall, and included guest Wi-Fi access that couldn't be rerouted through anyone's shed. For fun, I also installed a motion detection system behind the building that played, "Who Let the Dogs Out?" any time someone crossed the utility line after hours. It triggered 7 times in the first month. Every time? Karen. Rumor has it she's trying to sue the internet now. Or at least Reddit. Last I heard, she filed a complaint against a local library for having a copy of Cybersecurity for Dummies too close to the checkout desk, claiming it promotes vigilantism. As for me, the shed is stronger than ever. I reinforced the back wall with drill-resistant panels and added a solar-powered sign that lights up at night. It reads, "Private property. Cable gremlins will be prosecuted." The infamous pink Ethernet cable is now framed and mounted above my desk, next to the invoice and the FCC response letter. My espresso machine works perfectly now. Biscuit the cat has a new heated bed. And I've installed a digital lock on the shed door that only opens after verifying a two-factor code and a facial scan. Peace returned to the cul-de-sac, not with a whimper, but with a server log full of justice. And while Karen may one day try to rise again, she'll be met with more than just a closed door. She'll be met with a firewall, a security cam, and a homeowner who knows exactly how to fight back, bite by bite.